So the first thing we're going to talk about is how to add color to a vector drawing in Illustrator. So right now you might have something, hilariously, I hadn't shut my computer down since the last time I did this presentation, so this was still up. You might have something that looks like this. So this was what I would call my two elevations. So if you want to add color to a line drawing like this, your best practice is to do this in Illustrator or some other vector-based software. Because, again, this is like the game. Vectors are like mathematical representation, and JPEGs, which is what Photoshop does, is based on pixels. So that's when things get very blurry very fast, and you never want your drawings to look blurry. So in the spirit of that, I'm going to show you how you can go about doing a colorization of an Illustrator plan. But I'm going to stipulate this, that I will be following up immediately with how to do this in Photoshop. This is like a pretty complex process, and if you have sort of interesting geometries or complex models, then it will like be frustrating, and it's also something we cover next semester anyways. So to colorize a plan, you've all become very familiar with this property over here called stroke. Sometimes you change it over here. This is like if you had maybe familiarity with this program before, you just adjusted those things here. But under Properties tab, there is this thing called Stroke. And you've become comfortable clicking on it and changing the color and changing the line weight. So what some of you maybe have mistakenly engaged in is the fill tool. So fill is if you had a rectangle that was a solid rectangle, it would make the inside of that a color. Oh, I know. But so if you had a rectangle, the stroke would be the black lines and the fill would be the thing on the inside. So how can you do this though? So the thing is the colors that you are sort of doing, like these lines that came in are not pure rectangles, hardly ever. Sometimes they're circles. So in the last sort of demo, I showed you a tactic, which would be to create a new layer. This one's called layer 6. Drag it underneath to the bottom, and you can always just draw different kinds of geometry underneath it. So this is at the top because it's not on the right layer. Let me just go back. So that's one way. You could keep playing this game, but let's just stop here for a second. What about this do you think is not correct? If these little slots are windows and this is a wall, that's red apparently. What is not great about this drawing? One of the things that's not great is that this is like reading as one color when we all know that oh, come on, didn't mean to do that. My bad. This is all reading as one color when maybe I didn't really want that. I wanted it to read more like this is a window. So that's one strategy. The next strategy would be to come over here and grab all your lines. Type join. So join is under, I always hit Control J, but in case you forget, it's under Object, Path, Join. I think Control J is easier than remembering that. So Control J. If you hit it 2 times, it will close your curve. And now you can like make it whatever color you want. So that's the rectangle underneath things is if you have something easy. But if you have something more complex, you can do this. You can send things to the back. So you can actually select the lines that came from your Make 2D, join them, Control J, and then create a new fill color. If it's not like solid, I think I've seen a couple of these. I'm not sure if it was in this class. Let me get a poly. Actually. If you have something that's open like this and you change the fill, it may not fill it entirely correctly. Like, what is that? So it has to be more solid and a closed curve for it to really be a successful line for you. So again, with this one, I had Control J to join the lines that were already touching. And then if you have an open curve, you can just hit Control J again and it will close it. So that's kind of complex. An easier way is always going to be Photoshop. So what we will do right now is how to add color to vector drawings in Photoshop, but I caveat this for watch out for blurry images. So the blurry image thing is when you have taken your Illustrator drawing. I'm going to just go back and get rid of all this. You have taken an Illustrator drawing and it is not scaled properly before you bring it into Photoshop. So you might have a really teeny tiny 3-inch vector drawing that looks great in Illustrator, and then you take it to Photoshop and you do all this work, and then you bring it to InDesign and you make it 9 inches. So it's super blurry then. That's the thing you don't want to do. So you want all your drawings to be already scaled in Illustrator, File, Save As, PDF. Let's leave it there for now. Save. Save PDF. Photoshop. File. Open. Wait, not there. Elevations. Open. This will pop up. If you had a multi-paged PDF, you would be able to select an individual page from that PDF here. Really handy, but whatever. Hit OK. Okay, so the first thing that you might want to do is get rid of this checkered background. It just means it's invisible, but it makes seeing things a little hard. So what I do for that is I click here, I get a new layer. Oops, wrong button. It's underneath this, so let me move this a bit. I get a new layer, which is a piece of paper right there. I drag it underneath my lines, and I use the first tool that's going to be very handy for you, which is here. It's called the paint bucket tool. So as you can see in the little example, it will paint any region a color. So you can click this, click any color you want, click inside a group of, wrong layer. Make sure you're on layer 1 and click. It's much more intuitive, but it will inadvertently possibly make your drawings blurry. So this is what you need to be mindful of. So we covered how to add color to a vector drawing, how to add color to a Photoshop. Now we're going to talk about how to colorize a rendering in Photoshop. So sometimes you will, if you have the time, you can spend a lot of time adding all the colors to your interior rendering, making them flawless, making sure the lighting's not washing your color out all funny, doing all these adjustments. I did engage in that sort of activity when I was employed to do things like this. So I was being paid to work and like work on this possibly for hours and hours a day. So then I would do that. But in some more real situations when I was a student, I didn't have time to wait potentially 4 hours, 2 hours, 20 minutes to then adjust it and then hit render again to see if it was the color I wanted it to be. So when you don't have the sort of time to do that, I recommend just photoshopping it. And so let's say this is my rendering and I want to add a different color to this floor. Like, I don't know why I picked this green. This is terrible. You can select the floor with all the tools you have already. So zooming in, going through, selecting. If you wanted to do like a sort of color select tool, which some of you might know, if you want to use the magic wand, that's all on you. It's, you know, very relaxing day, so we're just gonna polygonally select all this stuff. Okay, so my floor has been selected. I need to select this part of the floor as well. How do I add to my selection? So this is a super handy tool. Daniel, do you know? I always forget if it's Control or Shift. It is Shift. So, no, stop. Whenever I click too much, it does that. So when you want to add more to your selection, if you hit Shift, a little plus sign pops up, which means plus, add. So I can come right back over here and add more stuff. What if I wanted to subtract stuff? Alt. So let's say I made it too big. That would remove that from the selection. But that's not what I wanted. I wanted to add. So without knowing that tool, what a lot of people do, including me back in the day, I would just be like, ugh, I've messed it up. And then I would escape out and start selecting again. So I've done all this like hard work selecting. If you do all this work selecting something, you should probably make sure that you save it, right? So this selecting game, like Photoshop knows it's an arduous activity. So you can actually go to select, save selection, and then you name it. This is gonna be called floor. Whoop. So now I've selected the floor and I've named it. I can now go over here. If I've escaped out and it's gone, I can now go back here, select, load selection, floor pops up. If not, you can just use this channel marquee to pick it and hit OK. Boom, there's my selection. Forever and ever, I will always be able to select it. All right, so like the task at hand is to change the color though. Image adjustments. This is like the zone for changing all things about your image. Hue saturation though is what we're interested in now. So I want to change this color. I hit colorize. And then you can use these marquees to adjust that color. So this is the color you're picking up here. This is how saturated it is or unsaturated it is. And this is how light or dark it is. What you do not want to do is to come over here and use your paint bucket tool, because it will sort of lose the tonal quality that your rendering has done. Well, let's say I'm fancy, right? You're all fancy. If you are looking for inspiration, I recommend going to this architecture studio and having a look at their projects. So this is a person, Nayron Turin, who is in the architecture program at Berkeley. She's an assistant professor. I've seen her lecture, and her drawings are very beautiful and simple. So if you go to projects, she makes like really lovely drawings with two colors. Grant you, she employs a lot of color theory, which you might not have had exposure to yet. But what's really important is that they're simple. It's not something like this, an architecture rendering that takes really, really extensive software and skills, like really, really very heavy in the skills. Some of these, I have been doing this for a really long time, and some of these drawings I wouldn't be able to produce, because I just haven't done that exact thing over and over again. So if you're looking for some inspiration, I recommend going here. Lots of very simple drawing styles that you can employ. So let's say I want to, I'm trying to find the one that I'm inspired by. Let's say here. I want to add a texture like this to my floor. So we have no good way of rendering this through Rhino. So what you would do is you would actually Photoshop this. So you can come over here. Let's say I want well, I'm going to do a marble one. Let's say a marble. You can grab whatever texture you want. You know how to do that based on the grass experiments. Copy that image. and then paste it. You can then transform it however you want. For example, this one's really huge, so I'm going to hold Shift and just change it to make it smaller. That was the transform command, Control T. But now I need to like sort of delete this stuff. So this is why we went through all the hard work to save the selection. Load selection. Floor. Okay. So here we are. We have the thing selected. If I hit delete, what is going to be deleted? The floor will be deleted, but what do I want to delete? The stuff around the floor. So it's funny, the little tools you learn that are like life-changing. One of my students yesterday told me this was life-changing. Hopefully this is life-changing to you. You just select inverse. So go to your select tool. It won't work if you're on the move tool, but go to a select tool, right click, select inverse. Same thing you could have done here. You could go in here and select a different, select inverse, but anyways. Once you have selected inverse, you can now just hit backspace or delete, and there is your beautiful floor. Oh my gosh, so nice. But it's also like a little cheesy because it's missing all the shadows that my last model had. Remember, I had like the sun's coming in and things like that, and this is kind of losing it. So this is the last sort of step when you add a material like that. You come up, you're clicked on that new material. In the opacity, you can now adjust these things. So opacity means it's just going to make it see-through. So this is going to be see-through by 50%. If opacity is 0, it's completely see-through. If opacity is 100%, it's not see-through at all. That makes sense, but the real fun comes when you adjust this. So there's this tab over here called normal. Normal is so boring. There are all these other ways that you can sort of adjust that overlay and how it fades into the one underneath it. So you can have a soft light, overlay, hard light. I don't know what any of these things mean. Every time I do it, I come in and I like look at all these different options before I make a decision. Some of them are super useful, some of them are not. Let's say I like this one the best, but now again, I don't really like this green floor. It's kind of looking even worse. So I load my selection again. Okay, keeping it, not inverting it, and then going back to image adjustments, hue saturation. There we go. So I managed to rather quickly make a semi-legit looking, it's not, it's like too big, but whatever. Semi-legit looking floor pattern on my rendering. Something that would have been probably not looking amazing if you had added the texture into Rhino. And it also might take too much time rendering and then finding out that it looks bad.